gets the presentation up. But what I'll do today is go over the latest with U.S. Department of Agriculture's hemp production rule that they've adopted under the 2018 Federal Farm Bill. I'll talk a little bit about Virginia's plan or what our intention is with respect to our plan. I don't have a lot of details now, given the timing of when the rule was published and where we are with the agency. I'll also then go over, thank you. So the second slide is kind of where we are. I'll go over legislation that was before the 2020 Virginia General Assembly session with respect to hemp and tell you what changes have been made to the hemp law. I'll touch briefly on the marijuana legislation. I know that that's probably of interest to some of you. It's certainly, we're getting a lot of calls on it. So I'll let you know what I know about the bill now. There's nothing final with respect to the marijuana legislation. And then I'll go over what you can expect for the 2021 growing season. So moving on, I know that you can advance Dr. Fike to the next slide. Thank you. I know that
it's yeah, for some reason it didn't want to go down.
I know that last fall we created some frustrations for hemp growers. Certainly VDACS experienced some frustrations with respect to the back and forth over the authority to regulate hemp production. We had some, questions as to whether Virginia could continue to be the primary regulator or whether USDA would have to be the primary regulator. So we do appreciate your patience as we dealt with what was coming from the federal government. Now we know what will look like, who will be regulating hemp production in Virginia, at least through the end of 2021. VDACS is able to retain primary regulatory authority over crop production through the end of December 2021. So the federal government has extended the authority that of the 2014 Federal Farm Bill for hemp agricultural pilot programs. And that's the authority that VDACS is currently using to regulate hemp production. So again, VDACS is going to continue through the end of the year as the regulator of hemp production, which means for the 2021 growing season, Virginia hemp growers will only need a VDACS issued industrial hemp registration, industrial hemp grower registration. As I said, USDA published its final rule in January of this year, and we are reviewing it. We have to have, VDACS has to have conversations with the Secretary's office and with the governor's office and with the Virginia State Police regarding a plan for Virginia to continue as the primary regulator of hemp production. So we plan to do that, but at this point, I can't say what the outcome of that will be, but we will have conversations to determine whether Virginia will resubmit a plan to the U.S. Department of Agriculture to continue to be the primary regulator. Dr. Fike, if you're able to, you can move on to the next slide. The Virginia General Assembly convened in January of this year and we're not quite out of the session. The General Assembly is no longer meeting, but there are still bills being considered by the governor. During the General Assembly session, there were a few pieces of hemp legislation. One of the bills, House Bill 2078, was carried by Delegate Marshall, and that was legislation that VDACS requested or pursued. That legislation has passed, and I'll give you kind of an overview as to the changes. It amended various hemp-related provisions in the Code of Virginia. It provides recognizes federally licensed hemp producers or individuals who have hemp producer licenses from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It provides the same protections for federally licensed hemp producers that a VDACS registered hemp grower has. So that recognition is important in the event that Virginia defers to the U.S. Department of Agriculture for hemp regulation. The legislation also establishes a registration application period. We haven't changed anything with respect to when we are accepting applications. We're still accepting them on a rolling basis, but we do have the authority to establish an application period if we find that that will help kind of the program efficiencies. The legislation also updates the registration application fee authority for the commissioner. The application fees are currently set in Virginia's budget, and that overrides what's in the code. So there won't be any immediate changes to application fees, but in the event that a future budget doesn't include application fees, we would then default to what's established in the industrial hemp law. The application fee is capped, or the fees are capped at $250. And the Commissioner of Agriculture is directed to establish a regulation regarding the fee structure. That regulation wouldn't go into effect until there's been a public comment period, and we are required to convene an advisory council as to any fee structure that is established in the regulation. The dealer registration category has been amended. The amendments, we hope, will clarify who is a dealer and will allow us to offer registrations to individuals or entities that we were hearing from that wanted a registration. So now the dealer registration is for any person who temporarily possesses unprocessed industrial hemp that he or she did not grow and will not process. So we were hearing from entities that wanted just to store hemp for growers, or to dry hemp, or to transport hemp. And that would be their sole role in the industry. And we didn't really have a registration that fit them. And so I think that they were juggling maybe a lot of agent forms for the people that they were working with. So now we have a registration category that better serves what the industry needs. The dealer registration is not and was never intended to be a retail registration. So if an entity is only selling a hemp product, you don't need an industrial hemp registration to do that. That entity is only in possession of a hemp product, which is able to be possessed by anybody in Virginia, whereas that plant material is something that requires that the holder of that plant material to have an industrial hemp registration. Okay, if you want to hop to the next slide, Dr. Fike. The legislation, House Bill 2078, also provides some new protections for growers whose crop falls between 0.3 and 1% total THC. That 1% is the federally established negligence threshold that appeared in USDA's new final rule. So in Virginia, should a grower's crop have a THC concentration between 0.3 and 1%, that person is not subject to criminal prosecution. Additionally, the Commissioner of Agriculture cannot determine that grower is negligent. So a crop that's between 0.3 and 1% total THC will not result in the grower getting kind of a negligent violation being levied upon him or her. The crop, however, will still be subject to the destruction requirement. The legislation that Delegate Marshall carried had an emergency clause on it, which means that it becomes effective when the governor signs it. All of the provisions in the bill become effective when the governor signs it. It was signed, and all of the provisions that I've just described to you became effective on March 12th. All right, Dr. Fike, if you want to advance one. Again, I will go over the 2021 marijuana legislation that's still pending. This is a huge bill. House Bill 1406, Senate Bill 1406 and House Bill 2312 are huge bills, hundreds of pages, and cover the legalization of marijuana in Virginia. I'm going to only touch on a very small part of what the bill does to give you an idea of kind of the regulatory structure of it. But there are many other pieces that I won't go into today, but just know that it's a huge bill, and I'm just touching on a very small part of it. So the legislation is, as I said, currently under review by the governor. Nothing is final yet, but the legislation does legalize simple possession of marijuana and provides for legal sale of marijuana. Those provisions are set now to become effective on January 1, 2024. The legislation also establishes a new state agency that would be responsible for the regulation of adult use marijuana. Right now, the agency is called the Cannabis Control Authority. It will be under, we expect it will be under the Secretary of Public Safety. The legislation establishes a regulatory scheme that would be administered by this new agency. There are licenses for marijuana cultivators, manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. As the bill's drafted now, that entire regulatory scheme has to be passed again by the General Assembly in 2022. Industrial hemp will remain under, or the industrial hemp program will continue to be administered by the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Industrial hemp is not marijuana. The law currently provides an exclusion for industrial hemp from the definition of marijuana. That same exclusion is included in the marijuana legislation that's pending. So again, industrial hemp stays under the authority of the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. The pending legislation does include some provisions that will that address hemp and will provide the Board of Agriculture and Consumer Services some authority to establish regulations for smokable hemp. There's some authority for the board to come up with regulations for testing of smokable hemp, for packaging, and for advertising. The legislation also establishes some authority for the board to promulgate some additional regulations regarding hemp extracts. So the board would have to come up with regulations regarding packaging and advertising of hemp-derived extracts. So that's kind of really very briefly what has happened with respect to hemp during the 2021 General Assembly session. So you get an idea of the law under which the 2021 growing season will occur. So Dr. Fike, you can advance to the next. So what we'll talk about now is what we can expect during the 2021 growing season. So as of Friday, we had 889 active and registered industrial hemp growers. We have received over 150 applications in the past month. So I don't expect to see that we will see a decline in the number of growers this year. That number obviously is smaller than what Jennifer said we had in 2020, but I think that's just a function of us, the timing of the receipt of applications and getting everybody renewed. We currently have about 270 registered hemp processors. 19 of those are under VDACS's food safety programs inspections. So they are approved to produce hemp extracts that are intended for human consumption. And we've got just over 130 active registered dealers. So if you are planning to grow during the 2021 hemp growing season, you need to get your application in as soon as you can if you haven't already. Dr. Fike, you can hop to the next slide. Right now, it's taken us about 45 days to process the applications, both new and renewal applications for growers, processors, and dealers. So get your application in if you have not yet. And if you renew between now and the end of the growing season, try to get your renewal application in 60 days before your registration is set to expire. We accept applications on a rolling basis. So while I'm saying apply now, that's just to help you have that registration in hand when you're ready to plant. But that being said, we will take an application and issue a registration on a rolling basis. You don't have to have any certain number of acres that you plan to plant. There's no minimum, and there's no maximum acreage that's required if you're going to grow hemp in Virginia. Once you get that registration and get your plants in the ground, you need to submit a planting report within 14 days of your planting. If you end up not planting at all, you need to let us know that by July 31st. Use the same form. Our form's available on our website, but certainly you can email me or Nakia, and our information's at the end of the slide. If you need us to forward you a copy of the form that you need to complete. In Virginia, pre-harvest testing is not required. However, if we select you for testing, we will let you know before you near your harvest date, and we ask that you not harvest your crop until we get a sample from your field. Our inspectors are flexible and will schedule a time to come out that works for you and acknowledge and recognizes when you're planning to harvest. As I said, if you are select, we use a risk and random system to select who we're going to sample. And if you are selected, you'll hear from a VDACS inspector by September. The Office of Plant Industry Services inspectors do the sampling for VDACS. And I saw a question pop up now regarding the cost. If you are selected for testing, for sampling and testing, there's no cost. In 2020, there was no cost to growers who VDACS selected for sampling and testing. I expect that will be the same going forward for 2021. But I expect I'm going to have to engage in a few conversations regarding that in the coming weeks. Regardless, all registered growers will get an email from us so that everyone has an idea as to what the requirements will be for 2021. We are assessing compliance using total THC. We always have, and we are going to continue to do that during 2021. That's the post-decarboxylation Delta-9 THC. We will also assess compliance using the testing laboratory's uncertainty of measurement. So that gives growers a little bit of wiggle room from that 0.3%. If your crop exceeds the acceptable THC level, we will require that you destroy the crop from which that sample was collected. Right now, as I've said, we are looking at the provisions in USDA's final rule to determine whether any additional modifications whether we can make any additional modifications to VDACS's 2021 sampling and testing protocols to allow some flexibilities. One that comes to mind, I know USDA has provided some authorities, some ability to do crop remediation. So we'll take a look at those provisions and see how we can weave them into our program, even though we're doing a 2014 Farm Bill program. So that kind of covers the growing side of things. I'll give you a little bit of information regarding products. For those of you who are planning to process your products or are looking for someone to process your crop, just some things to think about as you make those plans. So hemp products intended for smoking do have some distribution and packaging requirements that can be found in that code section you see on the slide. That is a criminal code section. It's not one that VDACS administers or that we have any authority over. But so it would be subject to administration by law enforcement. Virginia Alcoholic Beverage Control Agents do have some authority as stated in that section to issue summons. So when I get questions beyond what's regarding smokable hemp beyond what's in that code section, I suggest that the person with questions contact maybe their local ABC Bureau of Investigation to see if they have any guidance. I haven't been able to get any guidance at this point, but that's a place to go if you've got some additional questions outside of legal counsel. With respect to hemp extracts, I am able to provide some more information about the regulation of those extracts if they're intended for human consumption. VDACS has a food safety program, as many of you know. They have authority over foods for human consumption, foods being traditional foods, as well as dietary supplements. So there are some requirements for anyone manufacturing a hemp-derived extract that's intended for human consumption. There's good manufacturing practices, requirements that pertain to your facility. The extracts can have no more than 0.3% THC. There are some specific standards for heavy metals, mycotoxins, pesticides in those products. All of that information is available on Food Safety's website. So if you are producing extracts or you are putting extracts into a food, you need to submit an application to VDACS's food safety program. The inspector will contact you to schedule an inspection. There is a $40 annual fee connected to food processing businesses in Virginia. There is a lot more information about that program on VDACS's website. So I encourage you to look there if you are planning to add that to your operation. To touch briefly on hemp in commercial animal feed, hemp is not an approved ingredient for commercial animal feed at this point. There is an approval process on the federal level, both with FDA and the Association of Food Control Officials. So at this time, hemp should not be an ingredient in an animal food product. With that, Dr. Vike, you can put my contact information up there. My colleague, Nakia Thomas, is available to answer any questions you've got regarding registration application. Certainly, I'll entertain any questions that you have. Feel free to reach out. Let me scroll through the